Hello, everybody, and welcome to a history of the video game console wars presented by 5th Gen Not PKMN. You can follow us on Twitter, that handle. You can use that to find us on things that aren't Twitter or things that are Twitter a second time. If you hate yourself so much you still use Twitter, I'm not going to call it X. No. I'm not going to call it X. I'm just going to call it suffering. I'm Max.
I'm Andrew.
And we're going to talk to you about video game consoles. Oh, wait.
Maybe.
It's early. Don't be mad. I don't know, man.
We even need
because you thought, yeah, I like using the clicker. It makes me feel important.
Fair enough.
I like untying the bag the clicker's in. It makes me feel skilled.
Yeah, see, we have interactive mini games. For us, anyways.
Yeah, you don't get to play, but I want it, so I get 10 coins. Yeah, look, I can Yahoo! Laser point. And it's really bad.
Luigi.
So, the first generation of video game consoles looked like this. It released in 1972. Most of you would assume the first game was Pong, and it's not actually. It was the Magnavox Odyssey, which we'll go to in a moment. Don't be excited. Why are you excited about that?
It's not very often you hear people talk about it.
Yeah. Now I don't want to. I don't want him to be happy.
Yeah. You gotta make some compromise. So,
in this era, video games were built into the console. So if you wanted the shiny new game, which nowadays would be, I don't know what, Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 2, Modern Warfare 8, or whatever. Back then, it's just like Pong, but the paddle's slightly larger. And if you wanted Pong with a slightly larger paddle, you would have to get a whole new console because the games were built in. These consoles could also run on batteries. Now, I know the reasonable thing there is because TVs were just like these big hunkin' CRTs that weighed 1,000,000 pounds, and people didn't want to have to like move the TV to get to the power outlet to plug in a video game console. So like, oh, we'll just let it run on batteries. That's not why I think that was actually done. I think it's that if you wanted to play Pong on a camping trip and your generator only had one outlet, you still had an option. Anybody do that? No, just me? I only did it with a SNES Classic. There was an emphasis on multiplayer at the time because it was a lot easier to have someone else control a Pong paddle than to design a computer to do it for you. And these game consoles were not in color. So first out the gate, we had the Magnavox Odyssey. It was developed by Ralph H. Baer, who also made Simon. For those of you who are Zoomers, Simon was that weird game where it's just 4 colors, and it'll be like yellow, red, green, blue, and then you have to hit yellow, red, green, blue. And then, yeah, we didn't have good video games when we were kids. That was like what you'd play with. That or like the Bop It. So I know I said earlier that there were no cartridges and the games were built into consoles. I've already lied to you. The Magnavox Odyssey did have a cartridge system, but it wasn't in the thing where it's like, oh good, Mario Bros. Wonder, let's plug it in. It just came with cartridges that flipped switches inside the console to activate what you needed to play the game. Because when it comes down to it, most of us were way too dumb to do that for the console. Putting ski in to flip switches 1, 8, and 9 was a lot easier than knowing to flip switches 1, 8, and 9. This retailed for $99 or almost $600 in today money. So this is, you remember when the PS3 came out and everyone's like, oh my god, it's $600. This is $600. This is a PS3. I know, it's wild, right? And this sold 1/3 units, which is unimpressive now. That's Ouya numbers. But back then, that was like, maybe people want to just play Pong at home all day. That seems reasonable. The thing is, these consoles could really only display black and white and were very limited. So if you wanted to do anything fun, you would have to get this Dollar Tree fun pack that came with it. If you wanted to play poker, you'd need the chips. It came with a timer, so you could keep time on ski and then lie to your friends about your high score. And then you'd even get like these overlays for the television when you're playing like Haunted House. So if you don't have this, but you have an Odyssey, the Odyssey is worthless, just to be clear. The good news, again, is this is probably something you can get at Dollar Tree. And the cool thing is, we just kept getting more Odysseys. Like, well, we have a new game of Pong, let's make a new Odyssey. It was pretty cool. This was primarily to compete with other console manufacturers because, you know, you can only do this for so long before someone goes, well, I could do that better. I won't include money. So each successive console, though, did add new features like scoring, sound, difficulty levels, and not requiring dice. Finally, a functional video game. Nintendo even got in on the action with the color TV, which was in color. I've lied to you twice now. How many times am I going to get away with it?
Probably all of them.
Yeah, this isn't even real. I'm kidding. It's real. So this sold 3 million units in Japan, which that's a lot more than the Odyssey sold. It cost anywhere from $100 to $600, not in back then money, in today money. So but I don't think you're going to get one for that much now. Then we had the Telestar series. This is where people started doing drugs. This makes sense. I understand what's going on here. What I don't understand is why they decided to port Grand Theft Auto onto a 1970s video game console. This is real. I need to emphasize this. Who thought that was a good idea? So as you can tell, Telestar was doing a lot of stuff. They released 14 different consoles over just a few years and sold collectively about 1 million units. These were relatively cheap, starting at $50 then or $200 in today money, and actually caused the first video game crash. Most of you know the 1983 crash, which we'll get to later. These caused the 77 crash, wherein no one knew what to buy because everything was a Pong clone, and it got overwhelming. This almost bankrupt Coleco, who made the Telestar, but they did survive. The good news is they will not survive for long. Then Generation 2 came out. This is known as the Atari generation because of these 6 consoles, the only one you can identify is the Atari. I mean, who has even played that thing with the screen on it? Raise your hand. Why have you played a Vector X? Uh-oh.
We're sorry.
Yeah. No, I mean, your grandparents got a Vector X for you to play, or? Okay, that's pretty cool. I'm not sorry. I wish my grandparents did that. They just died. What losers. But yeah, so that thing, yeah, it has a built-in screen. It's really weird. It's called the Vector X because it mostly displays vectors. And it was not bad. So in this generation, this is where we started seeing cartridges, like real cartridges that had games that you could buy and play that weren't pre-installed on the console. And that was pretty cool. The controllers were also modular, so you didn't need the actual console in your lap to play it. You could just plug something in and chain it like, what, 4 feet from the console, which, gosh, really take wireless controllers for granted these days, because back then, you couldn't even get to the couch. Yeah, you're sitting on the floor where children belong. Yeah, I mean, you could still get a wireless controller for that, couldn't you?
Well, yes, no, but I was the kid always had.
I have to take these off.
Yeah, they're killing me.
So your parents could afford the Xbox, but not the wireless controller.
My uncle bought the Xbox.
Oh.
Gave it to me. Parents couldn't have the money.
Oh. So your uncle just hates you.
My uncle didn't know.
What game did he give you with it? Did you get like Blinks the Cat? Like not even Halo?
No Halo, but I got Dead or Alive 3 and Mortal Kombat Jedi Alliance as a 5-year-old.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't think 5-year-olds should be playing Dead or Alive.
Well,
That's a hot take. The jiggle physics don't work. Okay. So this is actually the only video game generation that Nintendo skipped. But instead, we got Milton Bradley. So that's great, isn't it? So here we have the Fairchild Channel F. This was the first console in the generation. And like all innovative technology, it failed miserably. It launched in 1976. And it used ROM cartridges, which is pretty cool. It was the first one to do that. It was also the first one to have CPU. Good job, Fairchild Channel F. I believe the developer was also, he was a big pioneer African-American in the video game industry, so that's pretty cool. So now it's just double bummer that this went nowhere. It had a rectangular controller. It basically looks like a Wiimote. That's a Wiimote. Prove me wrong. Or maybe like a Microsoft Flight Simulator controller. One of the two. Next we have the ColecoVision and the Intellivision. If you can't tell which one's which, that's fine. Neither can I. What's going on here? Yeah. This is what controllers looked like back in the day. They were like, we don't know, man. Figure it out. Now everything's just the Xbox Pro controller. You call your mom. Yeah. I mean, there were a lot of consoles in the 80s that doubled as computers because there was a lot of confusion about what computers are versus what video game consoles were back in the time, but this is not when that was happening. The Intellivision actually had a speech synthesizer, so take that, Hey You Pikachu. Intellivision got there first. It was compatible with 4 games, which is 3 more than Hey You Pikachu. And the ColecoVision, instead of having a speech synthesizer, did a lot of plagiarism because the ColecoVision had an Atari 26 add-on. So you could just play Atari 2600 games on your ColecoVision. I want to be clear about this. Video game consoles are generally sold at a loss, and the money is made up for in publishing fees on games sold. So, Coleco is not collecting money off of the Atari games sold for the ColecoVision Atari add-on. This is just a money pit for them. It does nothing. Atari still wins if the ColecoVision wins, which is so weird. And not only did it have an Atari 2600 add-on, you could also just plug in Atari 2600 controllers and play games on it. Why do that? This is the Odyssey Squared. I want to be clear, this is real. Had a full QWERTY keyboard because it did not know what it was for. It had a voice synthesizer as well. The controller was basically the cinder hatchet to the Atari 2600's lava axe. No one got that reference, did they? Yeah, thank you.
All right, one guy.
Yeah, good job. I played 7th edition. I hate myself. These were terrible. These just were the worst controllers. You shouldn't play them. And this is weird. This is technically the precursor to the CDI. The same people who made this went on to make the Philips CDI. So obviously this is a banger console. Then we have the Atari, the thing you know. Now it outsold all of its competition combined 4-1. Yeah, that is more dominant than the PS2 was in Generation 6.
Though no, we are excluding handhelds from that.
Well, yeah, we're excluding handhelds aren't real. These are home video game consoles we're talking about. Handhelds are their own thing. No one cares about them. Whatever, blah, 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 blah. This was a very forward-thinking console because you could plug in a Sega Genesis controller and it'd still work. Right? Like, okay. This is where video game genres started showing up, with Pitfall being the precursor to action-adventure games and Adventure being the precursor to not action-adventure games, but instead RPGs. Yes? Wait, Jack Black?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
He's done everything.
Man, love Jack Black. That's good trivia. I like that. I feel like I could never use that in actual trivia, though. No one gets the answer right. This is when third-party developers came to their own at the start of this generation, and you'll see going forward, a lot of the times if someone wants to make a video game console, and they'll just make a console and make games for it. But once we started getting cartridges, it was possible to be a company that didn't develop consoles, but instead just developed games. So this is where we started getting that. It also had AOL, Atari Online. You could download games through the phone jack, right?
DLC's always been a thing. It's not new.
I don't know. I think you had to get blank game cartridges or something, but you could download games onto the Atari through the phone jack.
That's something new
Yeah, so everyone who thought the Dreamcast was like a pioneering console, no. The Atari is where we got online gaming.
All right, and then we move on to Generation 3. We got into 8-bit graphics. So, and this is also where most people start to recognize consoles, because I didn't play anything before Generation 3.
Casual.
So we started out with the SG-1000, or the Master System in non-Japan regions.
Or the Sega Girl.
Yeah, because they rebranded it and basically everywhere they tried to release it, and it came out in, they had like 7 different versions of it.
It was something like that.
Yeah. You can still buy them today in Brazil. It's still selling in Brazil, the Master System, because I'm not sure why, but for some reason Brazil really likes Sega Master Systems. And I think we had numbers from 2016, they were still selling 150,000 units a year.
I'm going to, honestly, while you're talking, I'm going to Google if they're still for sale, because I haven't found anything newer than that. And I'm a professional, so keep going.
Yeah, and then of course we also had the king of the 8-bit era, which was the Nintendo Entertainment System. But this wasn't the only consoles. We also had all of these, which I'm sure all of you can name, right? Can anyone name one of these? Okay, we got one person who knows the Commodore 64. Good job.
They all have names on them, Andrew.
Didn't at the beginning.
Oh, okay. I'm not paying attention to him.
Yeah, but there's like a lot of different consoles here, and if you're a consumer, you're going to go into a store, and you're not going to have any idea which console you want to buy because they're all trash. So this led into the video game crash of 1983, where the market collapsed and went a 97% reduction, which is pretty bad, because if you're making $1 million, then you're making like $3,000. It doesn't work for you. So a lot of people thought the video game industry was kind of over. But what happened? Why did this crash come around? And it wasn't just because of all the consoles. It was a big part of it, but it was. I'm going to talk about the consoles. So it's because a lot of people had seen the success of the Atari 2600 in the previous generation, and everyone thought, hey, I can do that. That's a gold mine. I'm going to make money just like that. So they started putting out their own consoles. But stores couldn't stock all these consoles because they only had a limited amount of shelf space. So they had to make distinctions. So you would go into a store and you'd only be able to find like a couple games or maybe a couple consoles. So you didn't really know what you were going to be able to get at any given store. So it was very confusing for consumers, and if it's confusing for consumers, it's not good for selling to consumers. Third-party developers was the next problem, because they just decided that they were going to try to make as much money, and they weren't really caring about the product they put out. Atari being E.T. being a classic example of just something that just tried to shovel out just to get the movie tie-in, just trying to get the attention on it, just to sell as much units, and we all know how well that went. Yeah.
That would be the result of the manager who happens to be a corporate salesman, and then the person who hired him as a manager didn't know at the time, but that manager was the beginning of the downfall of Atari. He talked to Steven Spielberg of making an E.T. game, but he's trying to do the same thing as the Romans do for the city, trying to make the game that they built in a day.
Yep, but that did not work, as you can tell by the landfill full of ET.
To be fair, though, the guy who made it, everyone was like, it's not your fault.
Yeah, but fun fact, this is when Activision got their start. So they've been around since Generation 3 making video games. And the final fact that caused the crash was the competition from the computer market, because home computers were really kind of finding their own niche, and they were honestly more powerful, and because they had better hardware than home consoles. And there was a price war between Commodore and Texas Instruments to bring down the price. So a home computer was around the same price as a video game console during that time. And when you're trying to figure out what to buy your kids, you could buy them just a video game console that plugs in the TV that you're never going to use, or you could buy them a computer that maybe you can do like word processing on, maybe get some use out of it. So it was actually some competition there. So just all of these factors together really kind of drove the nail into the coffin. But Nintendo came out and kind of saved the day, because they decided to package a robot in with the NES, and, it was good.
Wait, Andrew, are those Beyblades?
Clearly.
Okay.
It was
Rob
Nintendo's,
lets it rip.
It was Nintendo's secret sauce.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the other kind of innovation Nintendo had was they figured out they needed to hire a QA guy. And they started doing that Nintendo seal of quality and only allowing a certain number of like third-party like titles per year. So instead of just being able to make a game in like a week and publish it, you could now, even if you did that, you'd only be able to make like 4 games a year or something.
I think it was 5. You ended up having this illegal market where companies would have to make counterfeit NES cartridges so they could keep making new games.
But for most legal companies, it meant that they would spend more time on a single game because they couldn't make more money by putting out more games. So it kind of led to games being more flushed out. And then we moved on to the next generation.
Imagine a world where they kept doing that and we didn't have all this shovelware. Okay, Generation 4. We're in 1987, we're post-crash, and companies are trying to make games again. They're like, oh, well, Nintendo proved we can make consoles. Sega proved that we can keep re-releasing the same console. Let's get in on it. So most of you think, when you think 4th generation, you're thinking the Super Nintendo. But the Super Nintendo didn't come out till 91. So there's 4 years of generation before we get that going. This is where we started seeing polygons, a little less pixel art going on. And this is where handheld video game consoles kind of started hitting the market, as well as companies starting to experiment with discs as a format instead of physical cartridges, because discs are so much cheaper. This is also when we stopped seeing like computers trying to also be video game consoles and instead just be video game consoles in another room. Because what do you use your computer for besides video game consoles or giving PowerPoint presentations at anime conventions? Honestly. So here we have the TurboGrafx 16 and the Neo Geo. These were 2 pretty big consoles at the time. The TurboGrafx 16 actually outsold the Sega Genesis in Japan. But not here, because you don't remember it. Huh? Yeah, I don't remember. It might have had a different name. It has it has localization names. But yeah, it was the first console out the gate for this generation. It was developed by Hudson, so I'm glad Bomberman got his own console. That's pretty cool. It sold 10 million units worldwide through its several iterations, which is pretty good, but you know, this isn't Gen 1 numbers where you could get away with that and be successful. And while it wasn't NEC and Hudson's last console, they just kind of petered out. This was their peak, being 3rd. Then we have the Neo Geo. This was the most graphically capable console of the generation, and it cost around $700. Would you care to guess what that reference point is for? Am I talking in today? Am I talking in I'm talking in 1990 money. That thing was $700. That is like almost $2,000 today. Right? The point of this was to play high-quality arcade ports of games. If you were one of those people that just popped quarters into a Metal Slug machine all day, this was the console for you. And games would cost up to $300 each. Back then money. No, don't say, no. This was easily the best console of the generation, and maybe of the next one. But like, you can tell this is a try-hard console with that controller. Like, this is not for normies. Yeah, at that point, yeah, just steal it. They did eventually re-release it as a disc-based console, and that did dramatically decrease the price of both games and the console. But by then, we were already getting into the PS1 era, so it was not competitive. Then we have the Odyssey 1 Squared, which is definitely a real console that I totally didn't make up. Dude, you can play Phantasy Star Online with it. Look at that thing. It's great. And then we have Nintendo and Sega. This is the final time they fought where people cared. Because they ran this generation. Nintendo really ran the previous generation with Sega kind of being there. And this gen, it was neck and neck. If you look at international sales numbers, Sega kept up with Nintendo. It was really only Japan where Sega absolutely shit the bed. I can say bad words. There aren't small children here. Super Nintendo sold about 50 million units, family-friendly, you can tell, because it's got that light grain purple scheme versus the Genesis, which is edgy and black. with smooth edges versus the NES, SNES, which has really sharp edges. That's how it works, I guess. And Sony definitely didn't develop the sound card for this console. That definitely didn't happen. They did, yeah.
They did. Both Nintendo and Sony. They did partner up in 19.
They partnered up. So, Nintendo was going to have Sony make a disc-based add-on for the Super Nintendo. Sony announced the deal at a conference, and then Nintendo was next after Sony, and they announced they were working with Philips instead.
The rival company.
Yeah, and
there's a reason for that. It's part of the deal was basically Sony wants to have mostly control over the system. That would be Nintendo PlayStation.
Yeah, Nintendo didn't like the idea of giving Sony publishing rights, which is...
It's not because they don't like it, they're scared.
Yeah, no, they don't like it. They're scared. They don't like it. That's the same thing. Sega actually made the same mistake with Sony, too. So Sony genuinely entered the video game market out of vengeance, which is absolutely funny. Yeah, pure spite. They're like, these companies suck. We're going to show up. And Andrew will talk about how Sony did in that in a moment. Did you have a question in the back? Or? Yeah. Yeah, might as well just, commit to the bit. The Genesis also had several expansions that made everybody love it very much. Everyone loves 32X in the CD. We'll talk about them more in our Sega panel or our Sonic panel. I don't know, whatever, man. Then we have these handhelds. Now, look at these majesties. We have the Lynx, the Game Gear, the Turbo Express. These all had backlit screens, full color, coming out in 1990. You could even watch your TV on the Game Gear. It had a TV tuner, right? I sat outside like in a hammock watching Discovery Channel one night. It was nice. The problem with 1990 technology having a backlit screen and full color is the battery life wasn't very good. So the Atari Lynx didn't even crack 1 million. The TurboGrafx got 1.5 million, and the Game Gear got 11. But you're playing a handheld console. You want the battery to last. And Nintendo understood that, so they came out with something way below the price point on these that had no color and no screen, but could run for like 15 hours. And when it comes down to it, that's all you care about when you have an annoying brat in the back of the car. Just give them that, give them Tetris, you're good. Oh yeah. Parents are like, we can't turn the light on when we're driving. I'm like, yes you can. I remember playing Jurassic Park on the Game Gear. But yeah, so basically the Game Boy sucked compared to these things, but it had really good battery life, and that's all anyone cared about, which is why this thing was able to just run for a decade. It outsold the other 3 pieces of junk that we saw 8-1.
Combined.
Right? Yeah, combined 8-1. About 100 million.
100 million-ish.
Yeah, and that's including the Pocket and Color and Light if you're in Japan. If you're here, you didn't get the Game Boy Light. Sorry. It's just a Game Boy Pocket with a backlight.
Yeah, so we're going to continue seeing this pattern where Nintendo just dominates the handheld market. Nobody really can contest them.
Yeah.
Basically ever.
Speaking about Nintendo not dominating a market.
Yeah.
Wait, Andrew. Gen 5, thank you.
Not a Pokemon.
Yeah, these aren't Pokemon.
Yep. This is Generation 5. This is where things really started to get interesting. We started to make that transition into 3D, or whatever Star Fox was doing then. I mean, people started using cartridges and optical discs instead of cartridges. Except for Nintendo, they didn't quite get that memo, and they really, really wanted to stick with cartridges.
To be fair, if I'm a 4-year-old, I'm way less likely to mess up an N64 controller. That thing's not going to fit in my nose no matter what. I could crack up the disc and shove it up my nose. Yeah. Don't underestimate me.
This is the first generation where we started seeing kind of a radical shift where Nintendo was no longer like king in the market. Sega has completely rotted. And then the Atari really stopped trying to be relevant. And Sony just didn't fail, so they did great in this generation.
Yeah, it's not just because of having great graphics. It costs less than the others.
Yeah, we'll get through there.
Yep, so our first consoles from this generation were the 3DO and the Jaguar. So the 3DO was hyped to high heaven. It was Time Magazine's product of the year and had several advanced features. However, it had some problems because they outsourced the manufacturing of the console to other companies. That's why it says Panasonic on there, because Panasonic was one of the manufacturers. But the manufacturers don't make money off of selling games. So now they can't sell the console at a loss. So the console launched for $700 at launch. And that's even worse than the PS3.
Yeah.
And it sold at least 1 million, because we know that many copies of Gex sold.
Yeah.
It also had great ideas like having only one controller port, and then if you want to play additional controls, you had to daisy chain them, because you're not supposed to do that at power strips. You shouldn't do that with anything else.
It's incredibly easy to pirate for as well. My 3DO, I only played pirated games.
All right, and then we had the Atari Jaguar. It sold 250,000 units, slightly more than the 64 bits advertised it had. So it used cartridges instead of CDs because they also didn't get the memo. They eventually released a CD add-on that made it look like a toilet. They pioneered that brilliant strategy of not releasing any games that the Wii U tried later. But it was graphically superior to other things. It had 5 CPUs. But how do you program for 5 CPUs? Nobody really figured it out, so it didn't have any games because nobody wanted to figure that out.
Basically, it had 2 CPUs that would tell everything else what to do. And they were Tom and Jerry. And Tom and Jerry were close to identical to what existed on the Genesis and the Super Nintendo. So what happened is when people were porting games over, they would just port over whatever they did for the Genesis to the Jaguar. So you're getting a low-quality port on something that can't run it well. Meaning that even though the Jaguar could run games relatively well, it was like just getting really bad ports that ran worse than Genesis versions.
Yeah, and since they didn't sell enough, they started to threaten to sue Sony for price dumping because Sony's console is so much more affordable than theirs. So they were a little upset about that. And then we had Sega.
The Donald Trump strategy.
Yeah, so we're going to count the 32X as kind of an entry. It wasn't a standalone console. It started being developed as a standalone console, but then they realized the Jaguar, or I'm sorry, what was it?
The Saturn.
The Saturn, sorry. It was right around the corner, being released in like the next year. So they just, instead of putting out an entire console, just a stopgap for a year, they just put out a Genesis expansion.
That's a stopgap for a year.
Yeah, and it didn't do so great. Like, it did okay in Japan, but when it came out in the United States,
the Saturn.
The Saturn was already out in Japan, so you could wait 6 months and get the Saturn. So the 32X did not sell well. And the Saturn had some great ideas, like having a controller that looks like a Walkman. I mean, I thought the N64 controller was bad, but this is definitely worse. And the best part was Sega decided to try doing a surprise launch for the Saturn to try to get some additional market share, because the best way to get market share is to get your console out of the gate. Problem is, they didn't tell their developers this, or
their suppliers.
So the Saturn launched with like the 3 first-party games that they made, and then all of the next games were like, all right, we're queued to launch in 6 months when the original launch date is. We can't have a game ready before then. So there was a nice drought of no games when it came out. And then because they didn't tell their distributors, they didn't have enough to get to distributors because they didn't manufacture enough consoles, so they had to cherry pick and only give some consoles to some distributors. And like KB Toys was one they didn't give any to. So then KB Toys blacklisted Sony or Sega and just wouldn't stock any Sega consoles from that point forward. So it was really kind of shooting themselves in the foot just trying to get out of the gate first.
I mean, to be fair, KB Toys just innovated a strategy that everyone else accepted 5 years later.
Yeah. And when they were developing it, it had one CPU, and then they decided, once they saw what the PlayStation could do, they slapped another CPU in there just trying to make it more powerful, but that slapdash was not good for developers because it was, again, this was another one that was notoriously hard to program for. I believe it also used quadrilaterals instead of polygon or triangles, so it was very different from any other console, so you couldn't just easily port things. And then we had the Nintendo 64. It was arguably some of the most powerful hardware of this generation because this was honestly the last time Nintendo ever had the hardware beef, unless you count Gen 9 because they were the first one out for like 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, when your competition's nothing, you're winning.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it was held back by the storage on the cartridges because Nintendo really liked absolute control, and the cartridges gave them that. Like, because they were the ones manufacturing the cartridges, the other companies weren't going to develop those. Everyone had CDs, everyone could print CDs, but you couldn't print these cartridges very easy. So it gave Nintendo that control, but third-party developers didn't want to have to deal with a lot of this. So they honestly ended up going to PlayStation a lot instead of to Nintendo. And also the cartridges were more expensive than CDs, so that it put additional incentive not to want to develop for this.
I know everybody gets upset about $70 AAA games nowadays. Most N64 games were like $70 back then.
Yeah. But on the plus side, they had much faster load times, but they had a lot less storage. So like your CDs, if you remember like Tony Hawk and the PlayStation, it took like an hour to load. But it was a great game. N64 stuff loaded instantly. But Nintendo
was still a great game.
Yeah. But Nintendo really carried this off of their first party. They didn't have fantastic third party support in this generation, but their first party support really kind of carried them on just the strength of the games. Like, because some of these games are games you still recognize, like Smash Brothers, Mario Party, like all of these games, like you still play their versions of today. This is where they kind of generated a lot of those initial ideas.
In fact, you can still get new ones to this day.
All right, and then of course,
like 5 years old.
We have the Sony PlayStation. It outsold the combined competition 2-1, and it pretty much didn't do any of the mistakes anybody else did. Games came on CDs, so they were cheap, and people liked that. Straightforward hardware, very easy to develop for, unlike Sega. So people liked it. So the third-party developers actively liked developing for it, and it never retailed for $700. Don't do that. And Sony actually reached out to third-party developers to try to make it easier to develop. So they had a fantastic third-party library because they were actively like making it easier to develop for their console. But as we were saying, yeah, it did come out ground because Nintendo did leave Sony kind of hanging at the altar during the business meeting. And then Sega and Sony had a meeting to develop a console. And they actually had a contract all drawn up and ready to get signed when Sega realized the contract they helped create would be absolutely terrible for them because it was based on each company managing their own publishing. And they realized that they weren't going to be better than publishing at Sony.
Well, Sega thought they were going to be.
Yeah, and then realized the contract was horrible.
They're like, oh, this is bad.
And just completely ditched Sony and reneged on the contract.
Imagine working for Sega and think you're really good at publishing games.
Yeah. The one disappointment that this console did was they didn't stick Dash Station on the end of every game like Nintendo did with the 64. Like, that would have been fun. And then we had the Sega Dreamcast.
Is that really Gen 5?
It kind of straddled the border.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of 5.5. But it wasn't really relevant then, and it wasn't really relevant in Generation 6. Because it didn't quite have the following that the other consoles did, because they all kind of carved out their niche, and Sega never really got there. Because they were the first one out, but they didn't have enough hold on the market by the time the other consoles were coming out.
They had 10 million sales.
Again, that's Ouya numbers.
Ouya's one. That is half an Xbox or a GameCube.
So these were the first consoles that came out in the 20th century. And this was honestly the first generation where cross-platform titles were kind of a big focus because the similarities in hardware meant that you could actually make a game for all three kind of at the same time without having to really stretch your developers because architecture was similar enough where it wasn't like crazy different, like triangles versus quadrilaterals. And this is where the computer also started getting competition again, because you started getting games like just for the computer, like StarCraft and stuff. So you started having that sort of competition from the game market. We're not really going to talk about them, but this is where that competition really came in. It's also where America actually returned to the console market. They've been out for a few generations, with Japan kind of taking over. But with the Xbox, America was back on the menu. Woo.
Yeah, no one cares about the Xbox.
Online multiplayer was...
No, you don't. You just love your uncle.
To be fair, I didn't really have much knowledge on video games That was all I had.
I just wish I loved my uncle. I'm pretty jealous.
I remember trying to play with a freaking Duke controller. This thing was massive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What?
We didn't talk about how the Sega Genesis console was managed to last until 1998 due to the Saturn expansion and the Sega Channel.
Yep, we cover a lot more on the Sega stuff on our Sonic and Sega panel later.
It's hard to go over 9 generations of video game consoles in an hour and go over everything.
Yeah. But yeah, so Generation 6 was where we started getting a lot more focus on kind of online multiplayer, because online was never really feasible before now. As you saw, you had it way back with dial-up and the Atari 2600, but that wasn't really feasible. You couldn't play a game over the internet in any sort of relative terms, maybe like chess, because it's turn by turn, but it wasn't a thing until now. Xbox really kind of pushed that, and then the other consoles kind of allowed themselves to be able to use that. But Xbox, it was a really focus. Also, 2 joysticks finally, because we really needed that, and nobody had figured that out until now.
Revolutionary.
Yeah. So first off, we have the PS2, which did a fantastic job in this generation, and it wasn't just because it was a good console and had some of the greatest games. It's because it was a DVD player.
Yeah, okay.
And it cost about the same as a DVD player. So if a parent is going to go out and buy a DVD player for themselves, they could get a PS2 instead and have something for their kids to enjoy as well as a DVD player, which in turn helped power the DVD market because it was kind of the new format and it was kind of get a foothold. So as more things came out on DVD, more people would go out and buy these PS2s and DVD players. So it was honestly a nice feedback loop that really, really bumped up the PlayStation 2 sales.
I think the funny thing is the parents going, oh, I'll get a PS2 instead of a DVD player so I can watch movies and my kids can play games. That parent definitely had to buy a normal DVD player after that decision.
But so PlayStation really just conquered this generation 3-1. Because they had good games. They had the third-party support from the previous generation. They kind of carried it into this generation. And then, yeah, and if you had cool parents, they would have gotten you a PS2. Mine weren't. I had a GameCube that I had to buy myself, so. And then we had the handhelds, where we had Nintendo, and then nobody else mattered at all.
Don't say that about my N-Gage. That thing is precious.
Maybe in a museum, Max.
Imagine playing Sonic on that thing. Like, the Game Boy has the right aspect ratio to do things. The N-Gage is terrible. You do. I'm just upset that I lost my power cord for it, so I can't really sell it. I know, right? Huh? Yeah. Here's the best part. So the original N-Gage, the speakers were up on the top, so you had to hold it like this, like a taco. And then they eventually realized, oh, we should put them on the front so you can hold it like a normal person. Oh, I'm up next. Sorry, I'm just so infatuated with the N-Gage and all the things it's done wrong.
Yeah, and we just don't talk about the Tapwave Zodiac because...
No, that didn't even release here. It's fake. I know, I
Nobody
looked
had
into
a
buying
Tapwave.
one. I'm sorry, I'm just so focused. Because N-Gage eventually just became a video game market on the App Store until they realized that also couldn't work out. It's just weird. Back when they thought you could play video games on your cell phone. What a novel concept that has never happened since. I'm going to play Bloons now. Huh? They didn't have Candy Crush, yeah. Dude, you would have to you'd have to remove the battery to replace the game too. It was wild. It was so impractical. Who designed it? Nokia.
I would be surprised.
I do not. No. This predates Goatsy. Okay, 7th generation. This is great, right? You all recognize this, the Game Wave. Bestseller. Definitely not a DVD player with some weird add-on. Game Wave did. Exactly.
We couldn't even find sales numbers for it.
basically the PS2 was selling, and everyone's stupid, so they wait a minute for it. But now that DVD players are selling, and the PS2 established that people would like to play video games on their DVD players, a lot of companies just tried to do this. And I'm gonna be honest, like I don't know how familiar you are with DVDs. Assume there's like at least one Zoomer in here. This is definitely a boomer panel, like in general. But back in the day, a lot of DVDs had mini games on them. And honestly, the fact that that didn't become like a niche market for this kind of thing was always surprising to me. Right? That could have done something. But no, we just whatever this is has like what 3 installed games that no one cares about. So this generation is honestly boring. The last generation, Microsoft entered the market, Sega left. This generation is just Microsoft is still in the market and Sega is still not in the market. Very few changes. We were seeing an increase in amount of online gaming, which was becoming really prevalent in the previous generation and became the standard here, assuming you count what the Wii has as online gaming and not, you know, a joke. But this is where it's just like, oh, we're just going to make better graphics and better online play and increase data. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, it's just Generation 6 Part 2.
Yeah, it's boring, man. I feel like Gen 5 is the coolest. Like, they're not Pokemon, but like as far as video games cool, Gen 5 is like the weirdest generation. So here we have the Xbox 360 and the PS3. Now, for those of you who were paying attention at the start of the generation, it's pretty weird that Sony actually caught the Xbox because this had a year ahead of the PS3 and cost like half as much because this was $600 on launch. Sony tried to replicate their success with the DVD by having the PS3 play Blu-rays. Yeah, and they were like, well, we'll just release a $600 Blu-ray player because that's not much more than a standard Blu-ray player. But people were like, why do I need a Blu-ray? This DVD I bought 2 years ago is fine. I just had to replace my VHSs. I'm not doing this again. Yeah. That was further conflated with the fact that Microsoft supported the HD DVD. Not on the console itself, but as an add-on. Because if they put it in the console itself, it would have been terrible. It would have been like, I don't know, if Sega committed to the idea of making the Dreamcast a fully functioning Sega Saturn. They almost did that. So initially the 360 outsold the PS3 because it cost half as much and you didn't have to buy the like HD DVD add-on if you didn't want to. It did red ring, but that was just, you know, an exciting fun time for everyone. The problem that happened was even though it started strong, Xbox tried to move into the Wii's more casual market because it tried to be an everything console, which allowed Sony to kind of like cement itself as the gamer console where you play Call of Duty and shout slurs at people.
Plus it had free online.
Yeah, no, the Sony did?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, Xbox Live was pretty
They
good.
didn't start charging for PlayStation Gold until PS4.
Okay, I mean, that's nice, but Xbox Live was fine. I got to play TF2. 600 hours of TF2. I played... God, okay, how many DOA games do you have? I need to know this now.
I mean, starting from OG Xbox
Yeah.
till modern day.
You have both beach volleyball games, don't you?
No! Funny enough, I don't own those. Though when I was a kid, there was a time where I was like, oh, beach volleyball.
Like, ooh, Tina. I want to see Kasumi in a bikini. Anyway, these sucked. It's all about the Nintendo Wii. And honestly, Nintendo Wii started really strong and then petered out at the end. It barely outsold the other consoles. Like, not even 20 million each. And that's because, again, like, the Wii was the thing. And then after 2 years, it was actually, we need a real console. Nintendo was really prioritizing local multiplayer over anything else and appealing to casuals, which worked at the start. It was very family friendly, so people would buy it. But ultimately, people would just be like, outside of these like Nintendo, like Wii Sports and stuff, and the Nintendo first party offerings, it's kind of scant. They just were doing a much better job at their formula than they'd done with the N64 or the GameCube. Yeah, everyone's mom loved it because they could play bowling.
And that's part of the reason that some of the sales numbers were inflated, because a lot of nursing homes had Wiis because they were really popular with older people.
Older people love Wii bowling. Everyone loves Wii. If you hate Wii bowling, you can get out. Yeah,
Also, please make sure you have your strap on tight.
Yes.
Lots of great videos.
Keep your strap on. And then we have the handhelds. This is where Sony decided they were going to, because remember, the 7th generation started in 2005 when Sony was absolutely kicking Nintendo's butt at the home console market. So they figured they could use the PSP and compete directly with Nintendo at the handheld market, because if they won that, Nintendo's dead. The problem is, you know how they did the Blu-rays for the PS3 and the DVDs for the PS2? So for the PS3, they're doing the UMDs. Yes, the Universal Media Disc that works on one thing, the PSP.
Not to mention the proprietary freaking memory sticks.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of problems there. So many problems that they sold 80 million units. The PSP did well. The problem with the PSP is it had really good graphics, and Monster, but who cares? The problem. So you remember when Nintendo released their first handheld, and they were competing against graphically superior handhelds, and what was the problem with those handhelds? Battery life. What was the problem with the PSP? Battery life. Nintendo was able to make this thing, and it was able to outsell this 2-1. How did this work? Oh, we all love the DS, but this was such a dumb idea.
I was saying PSP.
Oh, no one likes the PSP. That was just an idea. Gen 8, it's fun. We have to update this slide. It's not over. Gen 8's finally over, not the panel. The PS4 just did numbers. It helped that when the Xbox One, which is the third Xbox, don't do this to me.
Xbox 720.
See, that would have made sense.
Yeah, that would have made sense. When the Xbox One came out, it was always watching, and no one liked that. We had the Ouya.
Oh yeah.
And you know the best part about the Ouya? Towerfall was an Ouya exclusive game when it came out. It's a fun game. I think it's Towerfall. I might be making things up. I know what game I'm talking about, and if you don't know what game I'm talking about, that's on you. Yeah. So this is another Sony succeeds because everyone else is an idiot. The Ouya was fake. The Wii U was this.
Yeah, so the problem with
No one knew the Wii and the Wii U were different.
Yeah, people thought it was an expansion, so that hurt its sales numbers, and then they didn't put any games on it.
This thing was marketed as a new controller for your Wii. Like, that just doesn't work. It was. It had, they actually did have Ubisoft backing them at the beginning, but it tripped out the gate and all the third-party developers bolted for the door. Yeah. Oh, no. They didn't learn a single lesson. I don't know what you're talking about. In the handheld market, PlayStation did not do well. Yeah, clearly. There was something good about the PSP. You're making things up.
But it was just more of the same, just was slightly better.
What's wild here is, I don't know if you remember the 3DS launch, but that was terrible. This was Nintendo's dark days. It did in the end, but no one wanted it at the start. And you can see that because Apple outsold Nintendo.
Yeah, so the real winner of the handheld market has no longer been video game companies. The handheld, the mobile phone gaming share now blows the handhelds out of the water.
Yeah, I mean, what have I been doing in the hotel room at night? I'm not playing my Switch. I'm playing balloons on my phone.
And then, of course, we have Generation 9. So the Switch was really early out of the gate because they just decided, because it was kind of cannibalizing both their main console and their handheld market. When it first came out, we weren't quite sure how that was going to go, but now that it's
So, like, we'll pick a lane.
yeah, been out for a while, we've understood that it's now taking both lanes, and it's just Nintendo's kind of only thing moving forward. Because before they were split between handheld and
To be clear, this is kind of the same situation they had with the DS. When they released the DS, they weren't actually sure if it was going to replace the Game Boy Advance or just be a stronger handheld. So they thought they might be doing 3 lanes for a while, and then they realized that everyone was fine with that weird clamshell thing.
yeah. But so, and this now gives us when Nintendo starts putting like all of their usually handheld exclusive games onto a final on an actual home console. So
And now we can finally see
converged.
how bad modern Pokemon games once and for all.
Yeah. And then a bit later, we had PlayStation and Xbox come out. So Nintendo's still winning this simply just because they've been out a lot longer. So they got 139 million to the 50 and 21. But it's just these consoles are going to be around for a while. There's going to be more iteration on it because like we got the Xbox like disc-free edition, I think. So the companies aren't really
Wait.
feeling like they need to.
Is that the Xbox or the Monolith from 2001?
Same thing.
Okay. It was pandemicked. But like the Wii was also very difficult to get for the first 6 months or so.
But I remember,
I got mine by camping out at a Target.
and that's what everyone did.
Oh yeah, there's a much bigger problem nowadays with scalpers than there was back then because no one used the internet, which is why I was able to buy video game consoles at flea markets and then resell them at profit online.
Yeah. But yeah, so the console manufacturers no longer seem like they have to iterate quite as fast. They're very content to have like a single offering out and then iterate on it with different versions or just update the hardware because honestly, like the difference in hardware is not as relevant anymore because we're already extremely powerful. So adding another 10% is a lot less of a difference than jumping from 32-bit or from 8-bit to 32-bit. Yeah, and we're not getting an evolution.
I like
of
that. Let's
right
bring
now.
back the floppy disk. This guy's right.
Because we're still on Blu-rays, we're still honestly using DVDs. So there's nothing pushing the market to develop something like brand new that really pushes the boundaries right now.
Which is honestly
we'll,
fine.
We'll
I
get
don't
another
want a Switch
generation at
too.
some point. It'll be a step up in graphics, but I don't think it's going to be anything revolutionary. Like, yeah, well, I know we'll have to see. But it's just we don't know yet. And funny enough, Nintendo is actually getting some competition from other sources now because they kind of had that kind of weird handheld market, and now that the Switch is out, they are kind of the only handheld market. But now PC's entering that market with the Steam Deck, so there's actually some competition there, but the flow of the consoles just isn't high enough. They don't give out exact numbers, but we estimate about 3 million Steam Decks have sold to the 119 million of Switches. So it's not even comparable. But there's just going to be a constant flow, and it proves that other manufacturers can get into this market again. And it does fill a specific niche, but
People who are too ashamed to play games on their phone.
yeah, and it also lets you kind of play PC games in a handheld fashion, like if you wanted to play Hades without having to rebuy it on your Switch. It's an interesting medium, but it doesn't seem to be latching on. Maybe it's just because of not enough people can get it because of how they sell it, but we'll find out. But we also have this weird recurrence of classic consoles.
That's a piece of furniture.
There we
Thank
go.
you.
Where they're now remaking all the old consoles as little like special editions where they just kind of put like a handful of games onto it that were like the favorites and then re-release it. So as that nostalgia wave hits every couple of years, we'll probably see releases. I would expect to probably get like a Nintendo 64 Classic in the next 5-10 years.
No, that's never happening at this point.
I wish, but well, yeah, we'll have to see. Yeah, and with the rise of the emulation on like online, like it kind of reduces some of the need for this because they can just put it on there, and now it'll be available for every console moving forward.
And then they can just re-release Super Mario RPG for $60 anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have anything on that yet. We'll see how that goes. So you can we're out of time. So
We're also done with our panel.
you can follow our we have some more panels today. I hope these are the times. We're making anime great again. So if you think anime was good in the 90s and it's terrible now, you can check us out at Summit 345 at 11. I think it's actually 11:15, but whatever. Just show up at 11. It'll be cool. Sonic: An Unfortunate History, a history of Sonic the Hedgehog, and a slightly deeper dive into Sega consoles is going to be at 2:45 at the Arc building, which is the cooler building. They have the artist
I don't
alley.
know. This is the cooler
building. This is the cooler panel building. That's the artist alley building. Let's talk about harems. How harems were always bad and will continue to be bad in perpetuity. It's at 5:45 in this room. And then Pokemon Live, a panel about the Pokemon music. God, that is it? It's not at 8:30, is it? Whatever. You can follow us on social media. I posted all of our panels on several of the links provided there, so you can follow us there. But yeah, you should check out our other panels. We have business cards if you want a business card for some reason. And thank you all for coming, and have a fantastic convention.